Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome back and welcome to the Drummers Education Connection. We are super excited to be here today. My name's Jeremy. I'm here with my very good friends, amazing drummer and educators, Chip Ritter in Tucson, Arizona.
Hello.
Bart Robley in Southern California, Fullerton or nearby, and Rick Stojak from San Diego. If you've tuned into us before, you know that we're offering our community talking discussions about drums, about drumming, about education, and also products and industry people. And today we are super excited to be honored to have our guests here, Mike Brucher and Chris Brady from Aquarian Drumheads. Welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, two of the best in the business right there. Two of the best
Absolutely.
in the business.
We should mention that we're all Aquarian artists, and we're very thrilled to be that on our Aquarian roster. And we love their drum heads and support them, and we love the support that they give to us. So really happy to have a chance to talk to these guys directly. So before we get started in earnest, I will mention that we have a Patreon page. Chip's going to put the link in the chat. And our Patreon page, if you want to become a Patreon supporter, that helps us keep the lights on and pay for our expenses to run our program. We are going to have another Deck Day coming up in October. It'll be an in-person live event, and we'll talk more about that as it comes closer. So Chris and Mike, you guys, Chris is the CEO of Aquarian. Mike is the CEO of Aquarian, and Chris is the artist rep.
I like it the other way better.
Yeah.
You're fired.
Hey, can you imagine if Chris was CEO? He would have like one of those cartoon things on the side of the building of his head, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine if I was CEO, it'd be like...
It'd be fun for about a couple of days. Yeah.
No, it wouldn't go to my head or anything like that.
Yeah. Anyway, we are also going to give away a bunch of Aquarian drum heads today. So if you stay tuned and you stick along through the episode, you'll have a chance to win some different snare heads. Chris and Mike, I get this question all the time from my students. You know, they come in, they've been playing drums for a year, 2 years. They're buying their first drum set, maybe even their second drum set, and they don't know the first thing about drum heads. And drum heads are like an afterthought for them. It's just like, oh, what do you mean it doesn't come with the heads I want? So when they say to me, you know, what drum head should I get? I go to the store and there's a massive range. There's all these choices. I don't know the first thing. Let's put that to you guys. How do you approach that question?
Well, I think, tuning drums, it just comes with experience. But a lot of times the very first drum heads that come with the drums, especially introductory drums, are not the best. They're made to get you going. But what we found, and all the way back to Roy Burns, that a good two-ply head is a good way to go for a first-time player because they're easy to tune and make them sound good. Plus, they're durable. And as a new student, I think the experience of sitting down and playing and making it sound good, making it sound like you're a professional, is a lot easier than a drum that you hit and just rings and doesn't. It's annoying to the parents and the neighbors and everybody, but close up it doesn't sound good. But a good two-ply head can make it easier to make you want to play more.
So that's great for those people who aren't even familiar with the difference between two-ply and one-ply heads. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Basically you hit a drum head and it vibrates. And so the thinner the head, the faster it's going to vibrate.
Right.
If it vibrates fast, you get a little bit more highs out of that. When you put a second ply on it, that means a second layer on it, then it slows the head down a little bit. A lot of people say it makes them more dead, not ours, because the way we make them, it just makes them a little bit heavier, which brings out more lows and makes it sound what we use words like warmer, right? Brighter, warmer, those things. It makes the drum a little bit warmer. So a single ply, great head, will give you a little different type of attack and will be maybe a little bit more open. A two-ply head will be a little bit warmer and will sound more like you're in the studio.
I've always recommended to my students that if they're interested in playing jazz, single ply heads are they're sort of quicker, they're more responsive. You can have a lighter touch and still get a good sound out of it. Whereas the double ply heads tend to be for darker, thicker, heavier sounding, like more rock kind of styles.
I think the one caveat, what Mike said is a really great ground rule, and it pretty much would cover most students. The only difference would be if you had a student where you definitely knew, like say this student really is going to be focusing in on jazz or traditional bebop.
Right.
That's where, and we even see this to this day. Well, I've got these heads. We get questions from the drummers. I've got these heads and they just sound horrible. Well, the first qualifying question is, well, how do you play? What kind of music? Well, I just have a bebop kit, but they've got 2-ply Performance 2s on there.
Right.
You have to say, well, of course it's going to not sound right to your ear. So if the student if you know the student's a little more specific or dialed in, then you're right. Like if he's a jazz guy, not a 2-ply head, like our D.E.C or our single ply white texture coated or a modern vintage single ply. That would be the only time maybe you'd want to veer from recommending a 2-ply head.
So let me ask this in regards to that. Let's say we're at a jump off point here with a kid or a person that is going to go down one of those two paths. Okay. Either a jazz or bebop guy, young kid, they're really into that, or a rock guy. Now, I know you've kind of answered the question, single ply or double ply, but more specifically, they're getting their legs underneath them. They can play, but they're still starting out. What would be a suggestion? Would you go with the D.E.C for a beginner kid, or would you go, another route? Would you go with the Performance 2 for the beginner kid? What would be some jump off points for those two people?
I would say probably response to or Performance 2, right?
Sure. Either. I mean, I have a little bit different take on it because our 2-ply heads are maybe a little different than some other ones out there.
I agree.
And they sound cleaner. They sound, they have more resonance to it. I think that's what you're probably talking about. People think that a 2-ply head is dead, right? Mm-hmm. Because 2-ply, right? You're putting two things together. But the way we make them, I don't know if you've ever played a Response 2 or a Super 2, right? A lot of times they'll sound, I mean, they're as resonant as a single-ply head, but it's a different type of frequencies that come out. Mm-hmm. A single-ply head will have a lot more high frequencies. 2-ply head will have warmer, like you were talking about there, Jeremy, darker kind of sound coming out of it, but it's not necessarily dead. Mm-hmm. So, and I think when you're talking about jazz or traditional, a lot of old school would be you tune the heads really high, you have a lot higher frequency. Single-ply heads make a lot more sense than a 2-ply head tuned up really high. Right. But if you're playing more contemporary jazz or a little bit across the board, you can get away with a good, like a Super 2, if you need to. If you want to do that, you can tune it that way. But I think it's just traditional, what you're looking for, and I think that's what you're talking about. Traditional would be a single-ply head for jazz, right? When we have those in modern vintage, as well as D.E.C or classic clears, even. I mean, that would be really high frequency. Or
there's a modern vintage.
Yeah. So the thing about it is, I just say go play the drums first. Just play.
Right.
And get sounds in your ear, and then you can start going from there. You can go a little bit more. I want a little darker. I want a little bit brighter. I want it a little bit bigger sounding. I want it a little bit thinner sounding. But I think that the bottom line is go play. Have some fun. Get your ear in a place.
Yeah, when you're first starting, I wouldn't get, Mike's right. I don't know if I get too wrapped up into the minutia of tuning and tones and stuff, because my dad has a saying, you can't, it's hard to create from a vacuum. You have to have some source, some history, some influences to pull from, to know what sound if you're into Steve Gadd, or if you're into Bill Stewart or whoever, that now you've got to, but if you have none of that, you're just really shooting, aiming in the dark, shooting in the dark. And the 2-ply heads are good in another way for a beginner. First of all, you have a durability issue. They're going to last longer.
Right.
And what he was saying, because of the 2-ply, they'll allow you to tension it a little looser without it getting too papery. You know, sometimes when you try to tune a single ply low, it gets that sort of wet paper bag kind of feel and sound.
Yeah.
But a 2-ply, you can get it a little lower without it kind of, you know,
losing its resonance,
flappy or papery.
Right.
Yeah.
What's always appealed to me about Aquarian is how diverse the product line is, because we've talked about single heads and double ply, but there's a host of drum heads in between. There's, you know, if you have a single ply and maybe that's not as durable, but you like the sound, almost all of the heads are available with a power dot on them. So you can very much customize all of these heads. And so that's what's so great about Aquarian. I've had so many people, students in the day say, man, I actually called Aquarian back in the day and I got Chris Brady, or back in the day, Roy Burns would pick up the phone. I actually talked to the owner of Aquarian and he talked to me for about a half hour about drum heads. And that to me showed the sincerity of the company and really getting to know what drummers need, because you guys really understood what the customers wanted. So how many different product lines are in the catalog, guys?
Well, I think what you mentioned is basically we have styles of heads, and then we have variations on those, because we can add dots, rings, coating, different types of plies, different weights of plies. We have 1,200 different models.
What?
Wow.
Amazing.
When we consider sizes and variations, there's some like a response. You may have 5 different variations.
Right.
You have 2 plies of clear. You have a ply of clear and of coated. You have a power dot. We can do all kinds. So we can add these things, and each mod, we call them mods, kind of change it up a little bit. And yeah, it's a lot of, we have a lot to offer. But you know what? We're really for the player, like a lot of you guys, journeyman players. People are out there playing all different styles of music, playing all the time, have more than one drum set, right? More than one snare drum. And there's these little things that your drums might not do. Remember, a drum doesn't do anything unless it has a head on it. And so all the mods that you do to the head, meaning the weights and all these things, really add or change the sound of your drums. So this is what we do. I mean, we try to help make drummers. We want to make your drums sound better than the day you brought them home.
Right.
And exactly what's in your ear, because you play different rooms, you play different styles, you play just different on your drums, and every drum's different. So we offer, maybe, I don't know, is it a good idea we offer that many? But we do. And that's what we do. We make drum heads.
Right.
It is, I mean, it is amazing that you have all of those heads, because so many times you'll hear someone say, I don't like XYZ brand drum head. It's like, well, what head did you try?
Right.
You probably picked up the head that's just not right for you. So now you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying earlier with the
good point.
2 head, and they're a jazz player.
Right.
They can't figure out why, gee, this sounds horrible. Well, I agree with you. It probably doesn't sound good. It's not the right head for that style or genre.
Right.
You know, another thing what Mike said too, you know, especially you guys all know this. We all know this. But a beginner doesn't necessarily know this. Not that his drums would be going to different places, but different rooms will make your drums sound different. And we've all played clubs. We have our favorite clubs where the drums just sound like you're making a record. It sounds like you're in the studio. And then the very next night, you can go to another room, and they sound like you're hitting wet paper. They sound like they don't feel the same.
Yeah,
they don't sound as good. You didn't do anything. You're just in a different room. The drums are set up in a different area, and it changes everything completely. So to another one of Mike's points, at some point, and Roy used to say this too, don't get so hung up on that minutia. Just play.
Yeah. I think you do have to, once you've made your choice of what you want, and you do, you have to test, test out quite a few things to figure out what your sound is. But on that point, as far as one night from the next, I remember a while ago doing a gig where we had a sound guy that did 2 different gigs with us at one. Let's say it was, I don't know what day of the week it was. A Friday night, it was an outdoor concert in the park. And then the next day we hired the guy to do an inside club. And it was that outside. The one night, the drums, I tune my drums, playing in a rock band, but I tune my toms and stuff a little bit higher, more like a jazz drummer. I want them to sing at me. And outdoors, they sounded good, but the sound guy came up to me and goes, man, for this rock gig, they should really you should get some more bottom end out of those drums. He made that comment. Okay. And he's a drummer. So I took what he said to heart. And this was after the gig. So I pack up, go home. Next day, we show up at the next gig. I hadn't touched the drums. I mean, other than packing them up and putting them away. And I set up the drums and we did the gig. And after the gig, he came up. He goes, see, you took my advice, man. The drums sound great tonight. I was like, yeah, man, no problem. Yeah. And it really is. It is the room. And I think you have to find your sound. I mean, what drums you like and what drums work for you. But you also have to trust the process, like you were saying, that Roy, Roy said that a lot too. And that was one of the things that I always kind of picked up from him was, that trust the process. And also I remember him saying to me one time, something to like, 90% of the sound of the drum is the head. It's, the drum is just where the head what the head sits on, and he was right. He really was. So yeah, you don't get caught up in it too much.
I think for
you guys, we got a couple questions. If you're ready to answer a couple questions,
do it.
Dan Lynch says, "What's your favorite Aquarian snare drum head for all genres of music?"
I like. Well, if I was touring and hitting, just if I was touring, I'd probably use some sort of 2-ply, maybe like our high velocity. If I was still playing clubs, I would probably use our single-ply texture coated, or even more so, a Chip, I think you use this. This is your head, the coated Focus X, right?
Absolutely.
I probably use the Focus X because it doesn't kill the drum. It just takes enough of the little high-end ring out and dries it up just enough where then you don't really need to put anything else on the drum itself. So I'd probably go coated Focus X. And if I was hitting hard, I'd get the coated Focus X with the dot underneath.
With a dot. Okay.
Yeah. So real quick, while we're talking about that, can you briefly explain to our listeners what the coating on the heads does to the tone and what the dot does?
The coating, well, like Mike said, it has a dampening effect. It adds weight to the head. Mm-hmm. So it can warm it up a little bit, make it sound a little fatter.
Slows it down.
Remove some maybe unwanted overtones.
Mm-hmm.
Dots will, think of it like the dots in the center. Maybe it's on the nodal point. It'll have a dampening effect too. And then, of course, there's the durability factor of having a dot. It'll just give you a little extra longevity,
right?
In the center.
Yeah, to his recommendation, I totally agree with. But I tend to use a high velocity, which is a 2-ply head with a dot underneath. And the dot just gives a little bit more focus, gives a little bit more, not necessarily attack, but it just gives a little more focus. And it's a little warmer. But the thing that we were talking about, I play a lot of jazz,
mm-hmm.
Some hard bop, as well as playing R&B.
Mm-hmm.
And that head can get me through. So, it's a little bit, it's a misnomer that, 2-plies are for this style or that style. It depends on your drum that you're using, right? The way you tune it, because if you tune that head high, it's gonna sound like a single ply. It's gonna kind of respond that way.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's your ear and it's the music you're playing. It's the band you're playing with, and it's the drum. I played the other night. I used a 13x3 in the room, and it was killing. And I was using that. So I still do some playing, so I understand what you guys got to go through. But as far as the dots go, we have this thing, a whole line. We call it drum kit tools, and we actually give you dots, right? And they're Mylar dot, and but it's made with a special type of adhesive, so you can put it on the head and take it off. Do you have some of those down there? Rick?
I don't have any of the dots. I have a super.
Rick's got them.
Rick's got them.
Yeah, and you have them in a dot that's coated, and you have a dot that's clear. You can't tell that that's clear, but that's a clear dot, so you wouldn't even know that it's there. It wouldn't even be visible.
Yeah, but it's and in that we give we give two different sizes. But what it does is it gives you the ability to change up that. And I don't think you're not going to be able to hear it here. Chris, you want to hold that real quick? But see, it's made so we can put it on and we can take it off. It's kind of hard because it's on a white drum. But the difference, and you're not going to really be able to hear it, but that's a wide open drum. As soon as we put this on, see,
you can hear the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really dampens the sound.
But it also takes the pitch down. So we went from this to.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Now watch this. This is different. That was in the center, but watch what happens. I put it here.
Totally.
Up the drum. Now watch what I do when I do this. You see, it's off partly.
Yeah.
And so it's the position. What it's doing, it's changing the way the drum vibrates. And the great thing about these are, like, you can play a gig where you're playing, say, some straight ahead jazz. You want your drum totally wide open. And then the next tune, you're going to a big ballad, kind of a funky thing that you need to just give that really tight sound. You can put it here, you can put it there. When you're not using it, throw it on the side of your floor tom.
Yeah.
And I use this all the time. And like you saw when I put it at the edge over the side, that's similar to putting your wallet there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Because it changes the way the head vibrates.
Right.
And it makes that single ply head, it gives you a lot more variation, or a double ply. It doesn't matter which head. I think what we had there, was that a single ply or double ply? I think it's a single ply. Is that?
I don't know.
Hey guys, well,
I was going to say that's the modern day wallet or tea towel trick. You know?
That's right. And the thing that's great about it is it uses an adhesive it's removable, but it doesn't use, it's not like gaffer's tape, leaves a sticky mess. So you can move it all around. Or let's say you're playing brushes, you don't want a dot.
Well, that's a point I was going to make. Two things. A question first. Didn't you guys test those dots and they were able to come on and off the drum head like a lot of times before it lost the adhesive? Isn't that correct?
Well, it's interesting about that. That was a quest, and again, we do a lot of R&D for the right adhesives. But the thing that's interesting about it is when you actually put this on the first time, if it's a clear head, you're going to have to take it on and off, a bit to kind of get it so that it's seasoned for that head. And if you leave it on, say for 2 or 3 weeks, it's going to be harder to get off. But then you take it off and basically you re-season it and it works.
Yeah.
Hey guys, while we're talking about the dots, could we give away a set of dots to one of our listeners?
Sure.
Perfect idea.
Yeah.
Sure.
Chip, you want to pick one of our listeners to win a set of dots right now?
Let's go with Ken's Mechanics.
All right, Ken.
There you go.
And Ken's, by the way, Ken's also has a question.
Sure.
He said, is it common to have different types of heads across your toms, especially higher pitch rack toms versus lower pitch floor toms?
It's not super common, but we have artists that do that. They'll, on the smaller, rack toms, they'll do, let's say, a response 2. Okay. And then on the floor toms, they'll go with the force 10.
Force 10.
For example, because then on that, like say if they have a 16 and an 18, they want those. Remember we were talking about earlier, they want them looser without getting flappy. They can take that force 10, which is our thicker 2-ply head, and put a little less tension on it and get that low end, just gut rumble thump. And then have the rack toms, if they have an 8, 10, 12 or whatever, maybe more traditionally tuned. So
Right
yeah,
on.
that's here's the deal. There are no rules,
Right.
right? I mean, I have endorsers that put our thickest 2-ply head as a reso. If it gets you where you want to be and it sounds good to you and feels good, yes, I mean, there's things that everybody does. I don't know why I keep doing this, but there's
good.
things that everybody does, and they're sort of common, but you can do anything. And if you're not there are no rules. You're not breaking a rule. If whatever combo you dig and it works for you, then that's what it is. Go there.
Duke Ellington
which-
said, if it sounds good and it feels good, it is good.
Yep.
Chip,
There you go. Perfect.
Chip, didn't you say you use the Focus X, right?
I use the Focus X, absolutely.
On your share. Here's something that because like we were saying, we talk to drummers all the time. We like to talk shop, just like this. We get to talk to a lot of people, but all the time we get calls all day long. Chris will field, all will field, and we talk shop. And I learned from you guys, right? Since you can do anything, there are no rules. We've been having a lot of people. I've had maybe 3 people who have told me they're using Focus X, which has an inside ring built in on their resonant heads.
Wow.
And they say they sound fantastic.
Nice.
And I have
That
one
would sound
OEM company, that means a small drum manufacturer that use our heads. And now they're using this, the Focus X, with that on the bottom for their resonant heads. And they say it just takes out enough of that high-end frequency on, I think this guy uses birch shells, that he really likes the sound. He goes, that's the ticket. So, hey, whatever you want to do, we make them. Just make a quality head. You use them the way you need.
There is one rule that you do want to follow. On your snare reso, the bottom snare, use a bottom snare head.
Yeah.
I can tell you how many calls that we've gotten over the years are like, yeah, I put a classic clear in the bottom of my snare, and this thing is horrible. So you drill down a little bit and you realize they put a classic clear tom head on the
Tom
bottom.
head.
I'm like, I bet it does sound really bad. So when it comes to the bottom snare head, you definitely should stick with a real snare reso head.
And just to let you know what he's talking about, the classic clear is 10 mil. It's 10,000 inch here. And that standard snare bottom is 3 mil. Right. So you can see it's a big difference.
So what does the mil represent?
Thousandths of an inch?
Thousandths of an inch.
I believe.
Yes.
Very good.
Very thin.
It doesn't represent
3 mil.
It's not
millimeters. No. It's thousandths of an inch.
It means thousands.
Wow.
We got another generic question. Just all generic question. I know that we talked about there's no rules, but for somebody new, Dan Lynch asked, how important do you find it to change bottom heads and how often?
Yeah. I mean, that's a personal preference thing. At some point, the bottoms do need to get changed. And if they've been on there a long time, let's say they've been on there a year, and you change them out, you will notice a difference.
Okay.
Yes.
But it doesn't need it, 3 or 4
months. Would you say every other time that you purchase batter heads?
Yeah.
Well, no, you don't need it. But I think in response to his question, like we talked before, a lot of brand new drums don't have great drum heads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The bottom heads are generally extremely thin. And a lot of people think, you put a thinner head on the bottom. Not necessarily. I like to have at least a 10 mil on the bottom. A 7 mil is fine. But remember, the thinner it is, the higher the frequency. Right. But the bottom head is extremely important because you hit the top head, right? The air goes through and it causes the bottom to vibrate. That's where you're going to get a lot of your tone from.
Right.
And if it's very thin, it's going to bring out a lot of highs.
When Mike says thin, he means like a 7 mil.
Yeah.
Right.
But a lot of times, though, brand new heads, this used to happen all the time. I worked for a drum manufacturer, and when they'd have jazz concerts or where a lot of kids would play on them, they get a new drum kit, but they'd always have me come out and do Aquarian heads on them because the factory heads generally were a lot thinner they didn't have a great sound, and you wanted to have that drum to sound like it's ready for a concert. So we would always change the tops and the bottoms. But as far as wear and tear on the bottom, you're not going to have that wear and tear. But the bottom head is extremely important, very important.
I mean, unless
what I do, and I've done, with this, I play quite a bit, and I usually change the bottom heads like at what we call our touring season, somewhere around the holidays, like around Christmas time. I've done a bunch of shows throughout the year. The drum set's beat up. I've changed the heads on the toms probably 4 times throughout the year, again, depending on how much I play. But I changed tom heads out. I changed the reso heads out. I changed my snare head quite often, but I changed the bottom snare head at that time and just kind of get it freshened up. And Chris is right. I mean, you think the drums are sounding good, you put all new heads on them, and man, they start singing at you. They really do. It does make a big difference.
The only time you might want to change sooner is if for some reason the bottom head got creased, something.
Yeah.
Or it got a divot, a little dimples.
Yeah.
You might have a hard time tuning that out or tuning the drum. But otherwise, Bart, I think what you said is pretty accurate. Like if you're doing a run and that you haven't changed them in a few months or half a year, sure. But they don't need to be changed every time you change a batter head. That's for sure.
So since you're not hitting the reso heads and they're just vibrating, and they're vibrating like crazy all the times you're playing, what is it that wears down over time that makes them less responsive?
Well, they'll, like anything, they stretch. If you think about guitar strings, right? I mean, the reason they replace them all the time is because they stretch.
Right.
And drum heads have tension on them. So you're stretching the membrane, and then you're right. That's right, Jeremy. They're vibrating all the time. And they're at some point they will lose a little bit of
lose their juice.
Lose the juice.
Yeah, the drums don't.
There's something in there, and it's just you put a new head on, you're like, oh, okay, we're back.
Yeah, it really does. The drums just pop back to life, like right away. And it's one of those things that, you might play the drums. Yeah, it sounds okay. And then you change both heads, and immediately you're like, oh yeah, that's the way it's supposed to sound. Right. It really does. It comes to life pretty good. You'd be surprised. You got to remember,
these are the tools of our trade, right? And it doesn't matter at what level you play. You have a passion for drums. That's what you want to do. So you want to keep them always working as good as they can. That's why we make so many different heads. So you can kind of find your sound if you want, but also you can go and change your sound because you change the top head and you want to change over. You can change the bottom head too. Like we say, you could use that Focus X. You could use a thinner head if you wanted to, if that's what you're going for.
Right. You know what I want to add to that, Mike?
A boppy sound.
You know what? Sorry about that. You know what I want to add to that about changing the sound? You can also, I think it's very vital to consider the look of the heads too. You can change your look. Mm-hmm. There's so many different options, and I think that's going to make you play more. If you love the way the kit looks, you're going to get on those drums more. So you can have like the modern vintage for that more natural look. You've got the standard coated. I love these, man. The Studio X clear with the power dot. They're super space age looking. Yeah.
I think if you guys went with like a Chris Brady silk screen on the head itself.
Now you're talking. Now you're talking.
Why could we do that? Then there's like $1 or $2 royalty built into that.
It's Jeremy's idea, so he get the royalty.
Yeah.
Hey, well, okay. I want to throw this now that that's been thrown out there. I do want to throw this out there. One of the things that I love about Aquarian, I absolutely love about Aquarian and being on their roster, is they listen to their artists' ideas. This was a number of years ago, but I was playing a NAMM jam, and it was during NAMM, and I came to Chris during the show, and I said, hey, remember the Duradot idea you showed me the other day? The Duradot was brand new. And he goes, yes, I do. And I said, well, what if, you made a bigger one like this, and you used it as a patch for your kick drum? Because what if you go through the kick drum on a gig and you can't change out the head? And and Chris goes, "Hey, that's a good idea." And he ran it past Ron. That was back in the day when Ron was still the CEO, and they came up with the kick patch. What'd you do?
And I said, "Hey, Ron, I had a great idea."
I know you did. I know, but notice how now.
But that wasn't even your idea. You're
right. It was, and it was my bass player Greg Kasparian's idea. Because here's the way it went down: we were doing the NAMM Jam, and we had all these guys coming to play. There was just people from all over coming to play, and like a billion drummers, right? And Greg goes, "Hey, what are you going to do if somebody goes through the bass drum head?" And I was like, never thought of that. Luckily they didn't, but that's what, and what I did, I had a Duradot that Chris had given me, and I said, well, I can patch it up if it happens, and so and so it was Greg's idea. It really was. And then I took the idea from that with the Duradot and presented it to Chris. And this thing, I went and got it. This lives right beside my drum set here. I've got my in-ear rack. I put my in-ears, and this lives in there. So it's like a spare tire for your car.
Nice.
You're playing the gig, pop, throw that on there, get you through the gig. They listen to their artist. They listen to the drummer.
Well, I was going to say, you're exactly right. And I had talked with Roy a bunch about that. I mean, it's basically about the players. I mean, we're a lot of people, they'll market something, hey, this is what they want. No, It's like, well, what do they need? And it comes the other way. It comes from you. Yeah. But with that kick patch, then you guys know Eric Moore, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he took the kick patch and he goes, check this out. And you could do it, Bart. He just goes, don't take the backing off and just throw it on top of the snare drum. Now you get a big, wet, fat sound out of that. Right?
I've got, before I change out, I'll do that. I'll demonstrate that.
Here's one thing that I would do with it. So you take that, let's say you're playing a certain style, you need high frequency drums. Now you need to do a big, fat snare drum on it. Right?
Yeah.
So when you take that, you throw it on there. But how do you carry it? So what I do is I take the snare, right here, and then I shove it under the snares. I take it to the gig, right? And now I have, if I break the bass drum, I'm ready with that. If I need to use it for that wet snare drum, that's right. But on top of that, I can also take the dots and everything else that we have, all these drum kit tools, and I put them on that big patch. And that's the way I carry them to the gig. So now I can use a small dot, a big dot.
Love it.
Our little tabs.
Nice.
T-tabs. But I carry it all underneath here to the gig.
Perfect.
Very cool.
Just sits on your snare drum. That's awesome.
But
awesome.
But this is all for you guys. I mean, you guys.
Right.
What Chris and I, when we were working on our drum kit tools, right? We're saying, what do we call them? We say, this is not revolutionary. We all used tape, right?
Yeah,
and
gaff
napkins
tape
or towels and everything. Yeah. We just made it so it was marketable.
Right.
It could be used, and wouldn't use the residue and things like that. But these are all just tools that came from you guys. Came from Bart, well, from your bass player. And everybody would use this a little different.
I got nothing.
But that's what we do. That's why we call them drum kit tools. Right. Just tools you return.
Right.
Well, like the reflector heads, that was the impetus from that was through Eric Moore, collaboration with him. You just had Stevie D on a couple episodes ago, and he named the triple threat head. We had a name and nobody liked it. And he and I were out at lunch, and I go, yeah, this is just it's not clicking with Roy. And he goes, 3 plies. He goes, why don't you call it the triple threat? And I went back and told Roy, and goes, that's it. So yes, we listen to our artists. Sure. We like to collaborate. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the super kick came about. That was through requests from artists and drummers out there playing. Most of the products are, like I said, the impetus comes from artists or players.
Well, what if we come up with, I got 4 names for you. For snare drum heads, we got the Ritter splitter, we got the Stojak blowback, we got the Steinkohler steamroller, and the Bart Basher. There you go. There you go.
There you go.
You like that?
Go through the marketing department.
What's that?
I like it.
You like it?
We've got We've got another question. Dan
It's
Lynch
about the-
asked, what Aquarian drum heads would you recommend for the bottom?
For the
Just
bottom of the
in general,
toms,
for the bottom of the toms.
in general, I would say what Mike said, the classic clears
Classic clears.
is a good
Classic
starting
clears.
point.
You
That's right.
guys are, you guys, when you say classic clear, you're talking about single ply classic. That's a 10 mil, correct?
Clear head, yeah.
There you go. There you go.
It
I've
would be our
also used
basic,
some modern
that would be
vintage
our
on the
basic
bottom.
drum head.
What's that?
I've
What's
also used a modern vintage head on the bottom, and it
You
gave
should.
a real earthy, warm sound.
Well,
Vintage.
yeah, what Rick's saying there, the classic clear is a 10 mil, but it's clear. If you add the coating on it, like either the vintage coating or it would warm it up a little bit more. And in the old days, that would be your classic bottom head.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
back in the day, if you look at
Yeah.
your old modern
So-
drummers,
Yeah, Rick's right.
if you see ads for all the drum companies, usually the bottom reso head was always a coated head.
Right.
Yeah.
The clear craze didn't happen till later. If you look
Probably
at your
70s.
probably,
Yeah.
but the coated head on the bottom and the top was par for the course. Drum heads being shipped new, coated.
Can you
What's
guys
the
give us
difference
an overview of? So we've been talking a lot about tone and the different options Aquarian has for finding your sound, and that's something I talk to my students about all the time, is how important it is to be more and more aware of sonically how the sound of your instrument is fitting with the sound of the band.
Mm-hmm.
And what you guys offer is this range of heads to give drummers options to be able to adjust that sound so that it sounds the way they want it to sound. And I know there's a range, from the thickest to the thinnest. Can you guys give us a sort of brief overview of the product line from, darkest to lightest or thickest to thinnest, and what you might recommend for different kinds of drumming?
Well, we basically categorize 4 different categories: single ply heads, double ply heads, specialty snare, and specialty bass drum.
Oh, okay, cool.
And that way, now a single ply or double ply you can use on snare or bass drum anyway, but our specialty snare and bass are made specifically with treatments that we've done. Like our super kick would be a specialty bass drum. But we would start out with in single ply, our high frequencies, that's 7 mil, our classic clears, which are 10 mil, our texture coated, which are the coated version of that, 10 mil coated.
Okay.
And then from there, we start to do some treatments. So say the vintage, right? And again, we do a thin, which is a 7 mil, and a medium, which is a 10 mil.
Okay.
From there, then we have D.E.C.
Mm-hmm. That's strictly a 10 mil.
So all that we just told you were either 7 or 10 mil with some type of treatment.
And then the Studio X and Focus X.
Then we add something to it: Studio X, Focus X, and then some of them we put dots on them. So like a CC with power dot, so that. So that's that. 2-ply, we start out with Super 2s.
Super 2s.
Super 2s. That's a 7 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go to Response 2s. That's a 7 and 7. And we have all different variations of them. I'm not going to go through all that. It'd be confusing. But coded, whatever. Then we do performance, which is the same as a Response 2, but we glue it differently, so it's a little bit what do you want to say, muted,
A little, just a tad bit more
controlled,
dampened, controlled,
Yeah.
a little different feel too, because it makes it feel like it's slightly thicker head, but it isn't.
Okay.
Then we go to our hybrid, what we call our hybrid heads, and that would be where we use 2 different types of mylar. That's what we call the plastic on it, and that's where the reflectors came from. And Chris was a big part of doing that with Eric Moore. And we used a black 10 mil, which is a little stiffer, and then our 7 mil are clear on top. Then we went to, which is really popular now, is our white version of it, which uses a little bit different bottom white pigmented mylar and a 7 mil clear. This is really popular now because the idea with these heads, whereas you play soft, you've got a lot of nice tone. As you hit harder, it tightens up a bit.
Oh,
And I don't know if we can even hear it, but that was the whole idea with it. However, this has become, when we came out with this one, I think this is a great head, because what I say is it gives you that studio sound live. So if you put this on, it controls the sound, and it sounds like they're recorded heads.
okay.
On top of that, they're really easy to maintain, and we're having more and more rehearsal studios use these because they need something that's durable. Because
Right.
they'll go 14 hours a day being played on,
Right.
and then they have to look good. So because of the way this is made, they can just come and clean off the top of the head
A little Windex. And
with a little Windex, and it looks like a brand new head.
Freshen it up.
Yeah, and they'll run through these maybe every, in a rehearsal studio maybe every 3 months.
Oh, wow.
It's not
That's
a lot,
great.
but they're being played 60, 70 hours a week.
Man.
And they really hold up. So that would be that. And then you go to, and Chris can talk on this, on the Force, because he has a lot of artists that use the Force.
Yes, the Force is with them.
Oh,
You lady.
Bart, you just tried
Yep.
out the Force, I think, maybe for the first time on
Chip's
your
got it.
on your Vista Light. Chip, are you?
I
using
did.
Force, right? Yeah.
I had some Force. Oh, Chip, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm using the Force 10s on my toms
There
and
you
the
go.
Super Kick 10.
Perfect.
Good.
I used the Force 10s once on my Gretsch kit, and then I put them on the Vista Light kit. Yeah, it sounded amazing. Sound phenomenal. I have if we can circle back around just for a second on the coatings, because you're talking about the specialty heads, Mike, like the D.E.C and one that Rick mentioned, which is whenever Rick speaks, my ears perk up. He always has great ideas. I'm going to steal his idea about the modern vintage on the bottom. I'm going to try that. The modern vintage. Okay, so here's a texture coated, just regular, texture coated 14 with a dot, and then here this one's on the drum. Modern vintage. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. Modern vintage, this particular one is a single ply with a yellow coating, single ply with a white coating. What's the difference between the coatings, between the white coating, the yellow coating for the modern vintage, and the black coating for the D.E.C? Are they? Does it make a difference in sound? What's the difference?
Well, whenever we put a different pigment in, it's a different coating, right?
Right.
So yeah. So there'll be variations in the coating.
A little different weight.
A little different weight.
It does. Okay.
Yeah, and some things like that. So yeah, remember they start out as 10 mil. So there's little variations in them. That will be
I mean, with the vintage stuff, Roy wanted a head that, you're not going to replicate it exactly, but he wanted a head that sort of had the look, feel, and sound of an aged calf head.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what that. So the vintage stuff was all Roy's doing.
And the one that sounds. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just saying the one that sounds most vintage would be like the same thing as the Force 10. There'd be the double 10, which is the deep vintage, and that's going to sound thicker and more like a real calf head.
Is that's the 2-ply, the modern vintage 2?
210 mils.
210 mil.
Yeah, I have those. Those are great.
What I like about those heads is you can put them on the snare and the toms equally, the same head.
For sure.
And it just blends so perfectly. And I had a modern vintage 2 on my student snare, and it was played 800 hours.
Wow.
And still sounded good. Yep.
Good.
Hey, speaking of that, you guys okay if we give away a modern vintage 2 right now?
Let's do it.
Chip, you want to pick someone?
Yeah, we got a Jimmy Crawford can win that. Jimmy. Wins that.
All right, just send us a text or in your message with your information, and we'll get those heads out to you guys, as well as you can for the dots.
So
guys,
if you're
I have a
watching
question
this,
for
ask
you.
some questions, because you could win if your name is in
Crazy
the. If you're
Mike's
watching,
giveaway.
yeah, put your name in there. Say something, and you could win something. Anyway, sorry.
I have a question for you guys, and it's basically the Aquarian difference, you know, the manufacturing. When I look at an Aquarian head, it looks solid to me. It looks like it's going to fit on the drum. And can you just tell us a little bit about the manufacturing process and the difference between Aquarian and the other drum heads out there?
One of the big factors is the hoop, and this again involves Roy.
Oops.
He wanted to have a hoop that replicated the flesh hoop, meaning that's where they would tuck the calf, the flesh head around the drum hoop itself. That I think that hoop was probably made out of wood, but it had a rectangular shape. And Roy wanted to replicate that rectangular sort of aspect of the, which now they're aluminum, but he wanted to make that aluminum hoop rectangular, where the other hoops on the market are a U-shaped hoop. What this does, and I'll let Mike take over, but it adds rigidity. So our hoop does not flex. It's very hard to flex it in your hand.
Doesn't pull out either.
If you take our head and you go like this with it, you're going to see it doesn't move.
Not at all.
And that means when you put it on the drum, it's a lot more stable. It's not going to pull down on one side more than the other. It's not going to be warped, whatever. It's solid.
Right.
And that not only is that hoop made for that, but it's also the way that we made it so we can use it with the resins. And the resins are very, very important. In fact, during COVID, a lot of the companies who manufacture resins and glues and things like that, they were short on a lot of things. And so a lot of people would take shortcuts with adhesives and those things. We actually worked with new chemistry. We actually got a better product. We spend more on it probably than anybody in the industry on this type of thing. But the reason is because once it goes in, it doesn't come out.
Right.
So you don't have that popping out. And the way that it works with our plastic or Mylar, this is all stuff that it's all proprietary. It's all our stuff.
Right.
The way a lot of other people make their hoops, they'll have a channel that will bend into like a U.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that this particular hoop, because of the shape, because of internally, it's called an extrusion, meaning the aluminum is pulled into a shape, kind of like in the old days when you played Play-Doh and you push down and out came a big ribbon of whatever, right? Well,
I still play with that.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Bart, you're not supposed to eat it.
It tastes good, okay? I like it.
Well, this is what we do, and actually, these are they're complex to make, and but we have a custom manufacturer right here in Southern California that's been making them for us. It's our own design. It's a patented design, and it's very, 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 very rigid, but also it's really precise. And so that's why the heads tune pretty easy.
Yep.
And they're pretty reliable.
Well, Chris, is that also why the Aquarian heads tend to stay in tune more consistently?
Yeah, this hoop, well, first of all, you won't hear any cracking sound when you push down on the head. It's because of the hoop and the resin, as Mike said. It holds the head evenly 360 degrees around. So you don't get that slippage and things lock in. And, I've had drummers say, man, I've had this. Well, you guys have said it here in this video cast. Drummers have had heads on for weeks and weeks, months, and sometimes barely have to take a key to it.
Right.
Depending on how hard they're playing. So I would say that is probably the one big difference where everything sort of hinges on is this hoop design.
Yeah. For many years, I remember that the Aquarian tap test thing was the thing that everybody, Roy, take the tap test, and you tap the head off the drum, and it had a tone to it. And I have had so many students over the years, countless students, where I have an Aquarian head and a brand X, and you very simply go, there's the Aquarian one, and then you get the brand X one and you tap it, and it's the equivalent, same head, just a different brand, and you tap it and it just goes, it rattles and it doesn't sound good. They're out of the box. They sound better. And I've had many heads that weren't Aquarian heads before I had switched to Aquarian, which is well over 30 years ago. And on backline kits, you're playing the gig, you're a backline kit, you're in and out one night and the head doesn't split, but God, why is the drum not tuning up? Well, or why did it go out of tune? Well, right there in the channel, the head's pulled out and okay, well, I won't be using the second floor tom tonight, whatever. It does happen, and it never happened to me once on an Aquarian head, not one time in all the years I've been playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the collar guys also, I've noticed it just sort of fits right on the drum easily. And I've noticed drummers using other heads, so they'll actually, they call it seating the head, which, what are you doing? You're breaking the head, where they would actually like break that. Do you
That's that crackling. We don't recommend that. That's not needed with our heads. That's that crackling sound. I mean, you could put the head on, maybe put a little more tension on it that you would normally have it sit at. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's not really, you don't need to go to extremes with our heads like that.
And that's a couple of things that are different with ours. And because this is all we do.
Wait a second. You definitely don't need to take hair dryers and heat guns. You don't need to put your head on the drum and stand on it and bounce up and down. No.
We had
really?
Somebody called me last week and I'm talking and he goes, yeah, these drum heads sound fantastic, but my 18's just not right. And I put it on and I took advice from somebody online. So what'd you do? He said, I stood on the drum and then I took a hair dryer to it, because a lot of people say these things. I go like, and he put it back on the drum and it's like, no, it didn't sound right. I said, well, no, one, we don't tell you to, you don't have to stretch our heads, right? And you don't even have to do this cross tuning on the heads. You just got to make sure they're all pretty much, in tune with each other. And not even that, you can do what you want, but definitely you take a hair dryer to it. People, I see they do that when they have a divot, because stretches does those things, but you don't want to do. At that point, I say get a new drum head.
Yeah,
right?
like Mike said, these are the tools. This is for a lot of people, this is your living. These are the tools of your trade. If you were a carpenter or an electrician, you're going to have, Knipex, or you're going to have good tools. You're not going to. I mean, you could harbor freight it every now and then. We've all done that, but generally, if this is your gig, I mean, you're going to have you want to have decent stuff. Generally.
Yeah. And we totally understand. I mean, it's tough today, and things are expensive, and we've always kept our product in a good price range. We kept our prices down for 4 years in order to make it easier for everybody. But we understand people can't change their heads all the time, and they don't need to. When we're talking about these things, we're talking about, you want the optimum. We make a product that will make your drum sound as good as they can sound, and even better than what maybe they came out when you got it. But we're cognizant. We understand, it's expensive. So it is a big investment for some people on this. So
you remember sessions back in the day, drummers weren't changing their heads every take.
Right.
Now, every take I put a new snare head on. Well, that's great for us. We're selling more drum heads, but I mean, those guys back in the day, they were recording with the same heads for weeks and weeks and weeks. They weren't we're doing another song. I got to put all new heads on. That wasn't, and they were getting great sounds.
This isn't a great marketing message, but we're being honest with you because we
want to do the best for the drummer, not just try to push things on.
We play too, and we played, and we've been out there. We do all these kind of things. Our CEO is me, plays. Our CFO plays. Our attorney plays. Everybody does. We get it. We understand.
Chris plays, right?
And this is what I'm saying. We make product for the journeyman. And Chris, I need all four of you guys. Chris is a great player, but he is. Come on,
he's amazing.
Get him up sometime. But
he does. He plays like Jeff Beccaro, Vinny,
looks like
Apathy, Peter, Chris. You know.
So what I'm saying here is we'll make a really quality product for you. It's good for you to get advice from different people and try different things. But really, you're going to have to do it on your own. You're going to have to try it.
And
you got to use your ears.
There's a certain amount don't be afraid to experiment, especially when you're coming up. It's okay this is logging the pilot hours. It's okay to sit with the tom and detune it and tune it back up. And what happens if I do this? What happens if I do it from the bottom? What happens if I do detune one? You know, and take it all apart. You're not really gonna hurt it, but spend some time, get familiar with the instrument. Yeah. You know, like if you drive a car for a long time, you become attuned to it, and wait, it never made that sound before. Sure. It's the same thing with the drums. You have to sit with it for a while, and don't be afraid to try different combinations of things to get a feel for your instrument and your tools of the trade to know how they're going to react and respond in different ways depending on what you do.
Sure.
That's
okay.
okay.
Hey guys, can we give away a Focus Hex head?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's go with Dan Lynch.
Damn.
Winning.
Yeah.
Winner.
Hey, you guys.
The last thing I do want to, we're out of time. I just want to throw this out there really quick because we didn't touch on this. This could be a whole other podcast, but one of the great things about Aquarian as well is for teachers and for drum students, they make amazing learning tools. I've got some super pads here on the drum set. I've got a true bounce. It's got a lot of miles on it. I beat the heck out of this thing. On this snare drum that I have just sitting on my stand here, this is one of the super mesh heads that's on there. They make incredible things to learn on and to practice on. So check out their product line, check out their website, and this stuff lasts forever. The practice stuff is amazing, just absolutely amazing. The super kick, what I like about the super kick or the super pad for the kick drum inserts inside of the bass drum, and some of the other products on the market have these bungees and rubber bands that hold it on the bass drum. Aquarian has these great clips that clip this right over the hoop of the drum. I think they come with 4 of these. Is that correct, Chris?
Correct.
It depends on the size.
Okay, depends on the size, but I use 4, and I just clip them on there. It keeps it in place. It doesn't spin around the drum, doesn't fall off, and better yet, you don't end up, after a week of practicing, there's not a hole in the center of it going through to your kick drum head. Fantastic stuff. So check out their practice tools as well.
Great products. And don't forget, aquariandrumheads.com. You can go there, check out their whole inventory, and see what's new, helping drummers make music.
We're big fans. Hey, before we go, I'm real curious. I want to ask each of you, including Chris and Mike, what drum heads do you have on your kit or kits right now?
For mine, I have a 1983 OG recording custom, Yamaha recording custom, and it's got classic clears on the bottom, single ply texture coat on the top. What Chip has a super kick 10 on the bass drum. That's what I have on there.
Yeah, I have modern vintage 2s on my toms. I have a high velocity, as I said, super kick 2 on the bass drum, but I use a 16-inch bass drum. And on the front, which is real important, we use a regulator with no hole. So you still get some nice warmth to it, but a lot of pop.
Nice.
Very good. For my kit, I've got, for my touring kit, I've got Studio X's on the top of the heads, on the batter heads. I've got classic clears on the bottom, super kick on the batter side, and then on the front of the side, I've got a Buddy Rich BR signature head. Greg Potter endorses that for me.
That's a Bart Lovely signature head.
Yeah, exactly. I got Greg Potter loves that, and I've got a Studio X on my snare drum. What about you, Rick? What do you play, bud?
I thought you were doing the classic clear with Power Dot, no?
No, I've been using the Studio X with the Power Dot or without. Actually, I have the Power Dot back on there. I had them without for a while because after COVID, you were having some trouble getting the Power Dots. But and then you know what I do have right here in the studio. Like I said, that's on my touring kit. On the Vista lights, I've got the Force 10s here on this kit, the studio kit, and it just because it records really well. I've got a Studio X here on the 14, and then on the 12, I've got a classic clear with no dot and then a studio ring on it. And it records really, really, really well. And then a whole bunch of different snare drums with different heads. Oh, and you know what else I've been using? I have a 5.5 inch 14 by 5.5 or 5.25 Black Beauty, and that drum sounds amazing, but the triple threat on that drum is a must.
There you go.
Just a triple threat on that drum is a must.
Well, I've got that same Black Beauty snare, and I've got a texture coated on it. And I
do you?
Yeah. So it's all about what works for you, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. I've got 3 kits, 1 for teaching and 2 for gigging. And on the teaching kit, it's a 22-inch bass drum, big 12, 13, 16 toms. I've got response 2s. They're going to last long. They sound great. I've got a texture coated on all my snares. Super Kick 1 on the big kick drum, which I absolutely love. It's the best bass drum sound I've ever been able to get out of any bass drum with that Super Kick 1. On my jazz kit, I've got Modern Vintage 2 on the toms and Modern Vintage on the single ply on the bass drum, front and back, I think. And on my funk and rock kit, I've got Super 2s on the toms and a Super Kick 1 on the kick. How about you, Rick?
I like to have my studio that I give lessons be like a showroom for the products I endorse. So I have a little bit of everything. I like it when a student comes in and help them to pick out what's the right head for them as far as the sound and the look goes. So on this kit, I have the Studio X clear with the Power Dot. I like that little reinforcement of the Power Dot and how it dampens the head just right. The student kit, most often, I like to switch it out. I've had the reflectors on there, but the Modern Vintage 2 just look and sound so good. That vintage look is just amazing, and they last forever. And then on the acrylic kit that you see over there that I use a lot with DJs, I have the Super 2 Clear. And I found the Super 2 Clear is the perfect head for new drummers because they just tune up just like that. So
yeah, I like those too. So there you go.
Yep.
Sorry, Rick.
Well, the thing is that I think having a drum teacher is really, really vital. And use your drum teacher, not just how to play drums, but how to help you pick out your equipment. So everybody on this screen is available to you if you're looking for new drum heads, and we're happy to help you out and figure out what's right for you.
I've got the Focus X on the snare, the classic clears on the bottoms, and the Force 10s, and the Super Kick 10 on the bass drum, and I've been playing that since I joined Aquarian. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Oh, I forgot to mention at Bandworks, the school rock and roll program that I run, we've got Aquarians on all of our kits. We've got about 15 or 20 kits, and we use Super Kick. Those get a lot of heavy usage. So we use Super Kick 2 on the kicks, Performance 2, and Response 2 on the toms. Yeah. So there you go, guys. 5 different drummers, all who love Aquarian Drumheads, using 5 different setups. So you can find what works for you.
Yes.
They've got a tremendous variety, and they're all high quality. So thanks you guys, Mike and Chris, for coming on today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for everything you do for us and for drummers, guys. You know, Aquarian is the best of the best. So thank you for everything.
I had a question from my student. Can you still play Aquarian Drumheads if you don't play in 4/4 time?
It's May.
That's pretty hard.
Made for creators.
It can be done.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
It can be done.
Thanks, you guys, for tuning in. We'll see you next week. If you have any questions or you're watching this video after the fact, I know it looks like we might have had some Facebook feed problems today for some reason. Shoot a question to us, and we'll be happy to answer it after the fact. And you can get in touch with us and check out those guys at Aquarian. They'll be happy to help you with any of your head needs.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Jim.
Thanks, guys.
Drumheads.com.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.